In the great forest, Crush the lion and Gentle the mouse were arguing. "Crush, you don't understand," said Gentle. "Just because you're stronger than someone, it doesn't mean they have to admire you. But I am king of the forest. I am stronger than all other creatures. If an animal wants to speak to me, he should bow his head and call me Sir Crush. Otherwise, I shall eat him for being rude." The argument had started because that morning, Speedy the rabbit had come to Crush. Speedy wanted to ask Crush a favor. He was having problems with a hawk called Bright Eyes. Bright Eyes kept trying to eat Speedy, because Speedy was so fast. He could always run faster than Bright Eyes could fly. But he was sick and tired of being hunted by the bird. He wanted Crush to frighten Bright Eyes, so she would leave Speedy alone. "But Crush, I don't call you Sir Crush, and I am easily one of the weakest animals in the forest." Crush the lion flicked his tail quickly. "You are different. We're friends. You saved my life." "Don't you like Speedy?" said Gentle. "Pah! That silly rabbit. Well, it is true that he tells good jokes, and he is the fastest in the great forest. But speed is not strength. He has never done anything for me. So why should I do a favor for him?" "Ah, but I thought we were talking about respect," said Gentle. "Now you are saying that the problem is the favor." "It is both," shouted Crush. "Not only is he rude, but he wants me to do something for him, when he has done nothing for me. He talked to you as a friend because he likes you, and he wants you to do him a favor because he knows you are so strong, and it will be very easy for you." "Nonsense. He does not admire me because he is stupid. He is weaker than me, and he has done nothing for me. The next time he talks to me, I should bite off his tail." And with this, Crush walked away. He didn't want to hear Gentle's words anymore. He respected his friend, but that did not mean he always agreed with him. Crush went over to the lake to drink some water. He felt thirsty after shouting so much. There were no other animals at the lake today, which was lucky for them. Crush would have attacked them if they were there. Crush was just about to start drinking, when he heard a voice. Ahem. Crush looked up and saw that there was another animal there. It was Grunt, a very large pig who lived in the great forest. Grunt had long, sharp tusks. Other animals often talked about how strong he was, but Crush knew he was stronger. "Good afternoon, Grunt," said Crush, and then lowered his head to drink. "Ahem," said Grunt. "What is it, you big, fat pig?" Crush said, losing his patience. "Good afternoon, Crush. I think it is interesting that you are going to drink before me." Crush looked at Grunt. He hated animals who played games. Grunt may have been strong, but he was too smart for his own good. "Good. I'm glad you think so," said Crush. "And you don't see anything wrong with that?" "No, I do not." "Funny. I suppose being strong beats everything," said Grunt. "What are you talking about?" said Crush. "I am the king of the great forest, and I shall be the first to drink." The king? Who told you that? The mice who shake in fear of me. The birds who fly away when I shout. The foxes who do not dare make jokes of me. Grunt laughed deeply. Yes, yes. You are stronger than mice and birds and foxes. So am I. But do they respect you? A king must be respected. Respect comes from fear. Grunt shook his head. Oh, you poor old thing. The animals respect me, because although I am strong, I do not use my strength to create fear. I could even eat you, but I choose not to. Instead, I eat plants and insects, because they are too stupid to know how to respect me. Now it was Crush who laughed. You could eat me? I would like to see you try. Well, could is very different to want to. I have a feeling you wouldn't taste very good. But let us make a competition. We will fight, and whoever wins will drink first from the lake. Not only that, but the loser will also never come to this lake again. Crush smiled. He knew he could win any fight. You're on. So the lion and the pig moved away from the lake and stood several meters away from each other. They each got ready. And then they counted down. 3, 2, 1. Crush immediately ran at Grunt. Grunt jumped to the side. And Crush ran into a tree, hitting his head. You stupid pig. You are just as sly as a fox. Thank you, Grunt said. Crush ran again, and once more Grunt moved aside. This time, Crush fell into the lake with a great splash. He came out soaking wet. Now he was truly very angry. He knew better than to try running at Grunt a third time. So he stood and waited. Grunt smiled at him. Then the pig started sniffing around the ground and dug up some worms to eat. You are eating in the middle of a battle? Do you have no pride? Grunt ignored him and continued eating. Crush knew that Grunt was trying to trick him. Grunt wanted him to get angry and run at him again. So he waited. He waited until Grunt had a big, fat worm in his mouth, and then he jumped on him. The pig was not expecting his attack, and Crush scratched him across the face. Ha! A point for me, shouted Crush. But he was so happy at his achievement that he did not pay attention. Grunt pushed back, and cut his belly with his tusk. That'll teach you, said Grunt. The two animals stood opposite each other. They walked in a circle, each waiting for the other to attack. They were both bleeding heavily, but they would never give up the fight. They had to win, to prove that they were the king of the forest. You are neither strong nor smart, said Crush. I will destroy you and eat you for dinner. And you are neither strong nor smart nor kind nor pretty. You are the ugliest creature in all the forests of the world. This made Crush very angry. He was beautiful. His mane was huge and magnificent, his fur shone like the sun, and his tail was like a great flame. This pig would never be king. Crush prepared to run at Grunt, but then he heard an awful cry. Both of them looked up to the sky. In the air above them, flying in circles, was a group of vultures. Vultures? What were they doing here? Vultures only ate dead bodies. Crush and Grunt looked around, but there were no other animals around the lake. Then Crush realized why the vultures were there. "I don't believe it," cried Crush. "They want to eat us. But we aren't dead." "Look at yourself, friend," said Grunt. "We are both losing lots of blood. If we continue in this way, soon we shall be dead." "You are right. Let us end this battle." They went and lay down by the lake to rest. They were very thirsty from their fight, and they both drank from the lake. They did not care which one of them drank first. Afterwards, the vultures were still there. "Say, I have an idea," said Crush. "Oh?" He whispered his plan to Grunt. Grunt laughed deeply. They moved back away from the lake, as if they were going to start fighting again. "You big, ugly pig!" Crush shouted. "I'll kill you!" Crush ran at Grunt. He pretended to attack Grunt, but really he did not attack him. Grunt shouted in pain, and fell to the ground. Crush turned around and started walking away. One of the vultures flew down, and moved towards Grunt. Then Grunt jumped up, and tried to catch the vulture. The vulture avoided him, but Crush was behind him, and he caught the vulture in his paws. The vulture was shaking in fear. All his friends had flown away. Please don't eat me," said the vulture. "I promise you I don't taste nice." Crush thought about it. Before, he would have said he was going to eat the bird, just to watch him shake in fear. But he thought back on what Gentle had said that morning. "Let this be a lesson to you. Leave Crush the lion and Grunt the pig alone." He let go of the vulture, and it flew away. From that day on, Crush and Grunt were good friends, although they did still compete from time to time.
The awful crows circled overhead. At least, they looked like crows when you first looked at them. But when you stared at them for long enough, you started to see strange things. Unnatural things. Real birds don't stand in the same position for such a long time, without ever moving. And real birds don't run out of batteries. The robot crows cried unnaturally often. And if their battery was dying, the cry would come out hoarse, like they had smoked a whole packet of cigarettes in one sitting. At first, I thought I could wait for each of them to die out. I counted the hours, and I celebrated each hoarse cry. But then, as time passed, I started to realize a problem with my plan. The crows were being replaced. They did it in the night, when I couldn't see. The groups of birds never went below a certain number, and those were the ones I could see. I had no idea how many were hiding in the trees all around us. So in the daytime, we had to find a hiding place. Usually it was a cave. The robot birds couldn't go inside the caves, for some reason. But when we moved further away from the facility, there were less caves. So we had to crawl into bushes, cover ourselves with leaves, or find a tree with no birds in it and hope we were lucky. One time, I had to crawl inside an old tree, which was full of beetles. Those hours felt like forever. feeling the beetles crawl up and down my skin, across my lips, even under my clothes. Today, we were under a bed of thick red leaves, with a tiny gap to look through. The colors in the forests were amazing. I used to be the kind of person who loved nature holidays. I had hiked through the rainforests of Costa Rica, taking photos of waterfalls and tropical birds and snakes. Now I saw the scenery for what it was: food, a hiding place, or danger. I barely slept in the daytime. When I did, I had nightmares where I was hunted by men with crows' heads. Then I would wake up, and it would be night. And we had to walk like zombies through the trees. We was me and my dog, Fido. Thank goodness I had Fido. Without him, I would have gone mad a long time ago. I found him soon after my escape. I thought that once I was out of the facility I would be safe. I didn't think that there would be a whole island surrounding it, full of humid forests and all-seeing robots. If I hadn't found Fido, I might have lost my mind then and there. I reached over and scratched Fido behind his ear. He waged his tail, but not loud enough to draw the bird's attention. He was the smartest dog I'd ever met. He stayed quiet all day, hiding in the grass with me. Without him, I wouldn't have been able to move. He could see in the dark, and night was the only time the robots couldn't see us. He guided me through the forest, and kept us away from the humans hunting me. The crows ahead of us flew away. My heart jumped up to my throat. That was odd. That rarely happened. I sat there, still, for a long minute. Fido moved beside me. It looked like the area around us was clear. Carefully, I got to my feet. Fido wriggled out of the leaves and shook them off him. He was such a good dog, to lay silent and unmoving for so long. I gave him another ear scratch, and he wagged his tail again. He was a Labrador. I had always wanted a Labrador, back when my life was normal. I stretched my legs and we got moving. It was still light, but I was eager to take advantage of the opportunity we had. Fido ran ahead, clearing the way through the thick trees. It was like a rainforest, but not really. Real rainforests were so overgrown that you had to use a machete to cut through them. These ones only grew to a certain level, and then stopped, like a setting in a video game. Just thick enough to stop prisoners from escaping, but not so much that they couldn't easily be found by them. Something moved in a nearby bush. I stood still. Fido stopped a few meters ahead of me. He made a face that said, "What are you stopping for?" Maybe I had just imagined the sound. I started walking again, more urgently this time. Fido continued as well. He never seemed scared. A few minutes later I heard another sound. Someone was pushing a branch away from their face. I saw some red smoke to my left. They had found us. I started running. I fell several times, because my legs were weak from lack of food. Only fear pushed me forward. Fido moved quickly and easily. Maybe he had already known the danger. We pushed through trees cut through branches. Then suddenly, Fido stopped. I almost crashed into him. Thankfully, I didn't. There was a bright light. And when my eyes had got used to it, I saw that the forest had finished and we were standing before a steep cliff. In the distance the sun was setting over the sea. We had made it. The edge of the island. But 100-meter drop lay between us and the water. I looked right and then left. I could hear the hunters crashing through the trees behind me. There was no path down the cliff. Only a few bits of rock sticking out. Either I let myself be taken alive, or I died trying to escape. The choice was clear. Fido, reading my mind, started making his way down the cliff. I followed behind him. It was so steep, and the only option was to jump between the pieces of rock. After so much time running away from the hunters, I was weak, and when I landed, all the bones shook in my body. It was easier for Fido than me. But he was still struggling. He jumped onto a spike of rock, and it looked like he was going to fall off. But he threw his legs around it just in time. I threw a quick look behind me. There were two men stood on the edge of the cliff, guns in their hands. They were shouting and pointing, but they didn't shoot. I didn't know how long that would last, though. I heard a loud cry. I spun around. Fido was falling down the spike of rock. He tried to hold it with his paws, and then fell off. He landed on the sharp rocks, and bounced off, falling bam 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 all the way down to the bottom of the cliff. His body fell into a pile by the sea. It was an awful shape. Fido! I cried. I jumped forward. I didn't care if I broke my neck. I managed to catch myself on the spike of rock. The skin came off my hands. I stayed just long enough to regain my balance, and then I jumped again. A gunshot exploded behind me, breaking the spike of rock in two. I jumped from rock to rock, moving like a puppet. Somehow, I managed to get down to the water without killing myself. Fido turned his head towards me. Oh, Fido! I almost cried, and hugged his head against my chest. It was hot. Too hot. I looked down at his body. One of his legs was broken. But where there should have been blood and bone, there was metal and wire. Fido barked happily. But something was wrong with that bark. It sounded hoarse. Unnatural. I let go of him, crawling back on my hands and knees. But it was too late. A second later the robot exploded.